Hello, and once again, another video about human consciousness. To be more specific, is everything we see around us real, and who are we truly? I'm beginning to feel a dizzying certainty that understanding oneself is the most challenging task for humanity. So let's begin. Our senses help us survive. They save us from falling down stairs, car accidents, and poisoning from spoiled food. We rely on our perception, believing it shows us the real world. But do our senses truly reveal objective reality to us? Most people think so, even if we admit that our senses sometimes fail us. After all, artists and psychologists often create illusions that mislead us.
Do you feel, you bipedal and shaggy creature, that I've been starving for 3 minutes now?
Maybe because, Martin, 4 minutes ago, you ate everything off your plate. Calm down and don't interrupt. The belief in the truthfulness of perception is based on evolutionary theory. We assume that those of our ancestors who saw and understood reality better had a greater chance of surviving and passing on their genes. However, this theory has significant flaws. In reality, our perception is not an accurate reflection of the world. The problem isn't just that we can make perceptual errors, but that the space and time we perceive are not objective reality. This isn't an assumption. It's a scientifically proven theorem.
That's what I'm saying. When I'm hungry, space and time become illusions.
So how do our senses help us survive if they don't show us the truth? The answer can be found through the metaphor of a computer interface. When you write an email, you see an icon on the screen, but this doesn't mean that the file in the computer looks like that icon. The icon merely helps you interact with the computer without delving into its complex internal processes. Similarly, our perception is an interface created by evolution for our survival. Space and time are the desktop of our interface, not reflections of the universe's true essence. This explains why we should take our senses seriously, but not literally. In this video, we will explore theories presented in Donald Hoffman's book, The Case Against Reality. If you see a car speeding towards you, it's better to stop and let it pass. It's the safer choice. But this doesn't mean the car is real reality. It's just part of our interface, helping us make the right decisions for survival.
So you shouldn't be disappointed that I ate your sausages while you were babbling on with your nonsense.
Martin, you're an unreal rascal, an irrational feature of an already mysterious world. The author of the book, Donald Hoffman, explains how evolution created this interface and why our senses actually hide objective reality from us. We'll also learn how modern science, physics, and neurobiology support these ideas and challenge our understanding of the world, space, and time. And why do I tolerate that illusory scoundrel Martin the cat?
Because you're an illusory master, both literally and figuratively.
Consciousness is one of science's greatest mysteries. Despite significant achievements in studying neurobiology, we still don't understand how brain activity generates subjective experience, our thoughts, sensations, and emotions. How do electrochemical processes in the brain transform into the conscious experience of tasting chocolate or hearing music? One of the most fascinating stories in the study of consciousness is the work of neurosurgeons Joseph Bogen and Philip Vogel. In the 1960s, they performed surgeries on patients with epilepsy, cutting the brain in half and separating the two hemispheres. This surgery helped control epileptic seizures, but revealed something even more impressive. Each hemisphere began to function as a separate personality. When the brain hemispheres stopped interacting, amazing phenomena arose. For example, a patient was shown two words on a screen, key and ring. Each word was displayed to a different hemisphere. The left saw ring and the right saw key. If the patient was asked to say what they saw, they would respond ring, since the left hemisphere, responsible for speech, saw only that word. But if asked to pick an object with their hand, the right hand would pick ring, and the left hand would pick key. This indicates that the two hemispheres had different consciousnesses that could no longer exchange information with each other.
I noticed that long ago. When your slippers are clean, you're still human, but when they're peed on, you're the devil. Maybe your brain is split. You need to get checked.
One more word and I'll have you neutered. These experiments led to an incredible conclusion. The brain can be divided and consciousness split. The two hemispheres can have different thoughts, beliefs, even religious views. For example, one patient's hemisphere believed in God, while the other did not. This raises the question, what is consciousness if it can be split with a scalpel? Could it be that each hemisphere is a separate personality? These thoughts lead us to a greater mystery. How does the brain create consciousness at all? Neurons, like other cells in the body, perform physical functions, but there's no clear mechanism that explains how this activity becomes subjective experience. We know that certain activities in the cerebral cortex are associated with certain sensations, but how exactly this happens remains unknown. Research on consciousness continues, and new technologies such as functional magnetic resonance imaging and electroencephalography allow for a deeper understanding of how the brain works. However, the mystery remains. How do biological processes generate awareness? Is consciousness merely a byproduct of brain activity, or is it something more fundamental?
You're spouting nonsense, and I'm thinking all about a nice sausage.
Speaking of beauty, human beauty, or maybe animal beauty, beauty can be considered one of the most powerful forms of evolutionary communication. We subconsciously react to certain physical features because they signal health, youth, and reproductive potential. This could be something as small as a limbal ring, the dark circle around the iris, or facial proportions that carry important clues about reproductive potential. However, beauty is not just a set of physical traits. It also encompasses behavioral aspects that change depending on our evolutionary experience and individual needs. For example, during different phases of the menstrual cycle, women may change their preferences for men's appearance. During ovulation, they are more attracted to traits that signal high testosterone levels, such as pronounced brow ridges or square jaws, as these indicate good genes. At other times, women may prefer softer features, indicating readiness for responsibility and caring for offspring. These subconscious shifts in beauty perception suggest that our concepts of attractiveness are flexible and evolutionarily grounded. They reflect a desire to achieve an optimal balance between a partner's genetic quality and their ability to provide for offspring.
Exactly. The hungrier I am, the more beautiful you get. Right now, only a brown, warty toad can compete with you in beauty.
If you don't shut your trap, I'll wash you, and you'll look like that toad yourself. Beauty isn't limited to physical appearance. Social signals, such as eye contact and facial expressions, also play an important role in determining attractiveness. The sparkle in someone's eyes, created by light reflection on the moist surface, can add charm and indicate health. Glints in the eyes are associated with youth and health, and our brain even automatically notices symmetry in the glints. If one eye sparkles less, it's perceived as a sign of asymmetry, which reduces attractiveness. Thus, beauty is a complex system of signals reflecting not only physical appeal, but also hints of general health and genetic quality. This allows the selection of a partner with the greatest chance of successful offspring. The author argues that natural selection doesn't necessarily favor accurate perception of reality, but instead focuses on aspects necessary for survival and reproduction. Perception of the world has evolved not to give us an accurate picture of reality, but to help solve survival problems. Our senses do not necessarily reflect the world as it is. but provide us with useful information for adaptive actions. The book raises the question of the brain's role in perception. It doesn't just record reality like a video camera, it actively constructs it. When a person looks at objects, the brain uses complex processes to interpret signals coming from photoreceptors. The author supports the idea that the brain doesn't simply see the world, but creates a symbolic interpretation of the surrounding reality. This means we don't perceive the real world, but a world created by our brain. However, Hoffman challenges the classical assumption that neurons exist independently of the observer. He argues that if we construct everything we see, then the neurons we perceive are also a construct of the brain. Yes, don't be surprised. The author believes that we create ourselves. You may ask why I read this nonsense and even share it with you. Listen further. The author has surprisingly strong arguments to support his position. Most scientists, including Francis Crick, are convinced that neurons and other objects do not exist independently of our perception.
Oh, so it was the author who knocked the ground out from under you the day before yesterday when you, tipsy with beer, tripped over my litter box and spilled everything on your back.
You, unreal creature, upset me. You ruined my favorite mouse pad. Wasn't your scratching post enough?
What's wrong with that? I walk by, see an unreal mouse pad, so I sharpen my unreal claws on it, of an unreal beautiful cat.
Get out of here! The author cites the works of other researchers, such as David Marr, who believed that evolution developed our perception to accurately reflect reality, which helped us survive. However, he questions this, providing the example of simple organisms like flies, which can survive without accurately perceiving the surrounding world. He argues that natural selection favors not objectively accurate perception, but rather perception that is useful for survival. In other words, our perception serves not to reflect the truth, but to facilitate adaptive behavior that enhances survival chances. Here, I must agree with the author. In my earlier videos, there were attempts to teach simulated characters to survive. One of the characters was a car living in a nest and raising children. From our perspective, the car drove around the factory, bumping into scrap metal. But for the car, there was no factory or scrap metal. There were 20 pairs of numbers indicating the distance to obstacles and the type of obstacle. These data were fed into the car's brain and influenced its decisions. But the lack of data didn't stop the car from efficiently driving around the factory and protecting its nest. If I had given it real video footage of the factory, its primitive brain simply wouldn't have coped.
Do you know why I adapted to you and not vice versa?
Well, why?
Because your primitive brain wouldn't cope with me.
And so it goes. Either I kick him out of the house, or he kicks me out. So, as you understand, the principle that adaptability trumps truth is supported by numerous simulations that have shown that perception oriented towards adaptation can outcompete accurate perception of reality. For example, we all watch color screens and enjoy it, but what's real in those flashing pixels? There are plenty of well-known examples showing how easily our visual system can be tricked. But all this is clear and obvious. However, the author in his reflections on the nature of reality goes further, much further, far beyond.
Although probably not farther than the place I send you when you forget to feed me.
You're right, I'm talking nonsense. After all, space doesn't exist and time doesn't exist, as some physicists say. Didn't you know? Modern physicists increasingly suggest that our concepts of space and time may not be the foundation of reality, but rather a convenient illusion. This means that what we perceive as three-dimensional space and the flow of time may just be a way for our consciousness to navigate the world. Renowned physicist David Gross, a Nobel Prize winner, openly stated that nearly all scientists working on string theory believe that space and time are doomed. This means they aren't fundamental components of the universe, and in the future, scientists might find a deeper explanation of how everything works. Physicist Nathan Seiberg even called space and time an illusion that will later be replaced by more precise concepts. This sounds quite radical, but he means that our conventional ideas about these categories are just a convenient, simplified model created by consciousness to interact with the environment. I'll explain why physicists think this way. There are several properties of the world that point to this. I'll tell you about some of them. The holographic principle. The holographic principle states that a three-dimensional object can be fully described by information on the two-dimensional surface that surrounds it. It's similar to how information on an ordinary hologram is encoded on a flat surface, but we see a three-dimensional image. Gerard Hooft and Leonard Susskind proposed that all physical events within a volume can be recorded on its two-dimensional boundary. This challenges the idea that volumes of space have independent reality. Didn't get what that means? It's simple. The third dimension doesn't add any information that couldn't be recorded in a two-dimensional space. For example, a three-dimensional stereo movie can be recorded on a flat DVD disc or magnetic tape. For physicists, this is a signal that something is off with the third dimension. Quantum entanglement. I think everyone's heard of the strange connection between entangled particles, where measuring one affects the state of the other, regardless of the distance between them. But since the speed of light is limited, and the speed of interaction between entangled particles is not, scientists hypothesize that the third dimension may not actually exist, and then everything fits perfectly. Personally, I prefer the multiverse explanation. The next alarm bell that the universe might be two-dimensional is the problem of black holes. The main equation of quantum mechanics that describes the change of any system's state over time is Schrödinger's equation. Without going into details, it can be said that this equation implies that no information in our world is lost.
Yes, the universe remembers all your dirty sins.
Oh, shut up, you perverse cat. What it means that information cannot be lost. Imagine two balls colliding in the air and flying off in different directions. Knowing their positions at any moment and the parameters of all particles of the balls in the air, one could calculate how they moved before the collision. And not just the balls. One could calculate the position of every atom all the way back to the Big Bang. However, in the context of black holes, a problem arises. When a black hole absorbs an object, all the properties of that object seem to be lost beyond the event horizon, the invisible boundary of the black hole. According to classical theory, everything that falls into a black hole disappears forever. More precisely, access to that information is lost. But if a black hole evaporates, as Stephen Hawking suggested, through its radiation, it loses mass and eventually disappears. If the information about everything absorbed by the black hole also disappears, this contradicts the principle of information conservation in quantum mechanics. This contradiction between classical black hole theory and quantum mechanics led to the black hole information paradox. According to quantum mechanics, information cannot disappear, even if an object undergoes radical changes. Otherwise, it would violate a fundamental law of physics. Therefore, scientists are trying to find a way to reconcile these two concepts, leading to new ideas such as the holographic principle or the assumption that information is preserved on the black hole's event horizon in the form of a hologram. This is an assumption. It seems strange to me, but for now it's all we have. There are other observations that may suggest space-time isn't quite what we imagine, but that's a topic for another video. Donald Hoffman provides numerous examples of how we inadequately perceive reality. and we know this. The brain actively constructs our view of the world and often shows us things that aren't there.
Your primary task is to feed and pet the cat, not to look around.
What's most interesting is that there's no way to debunk your theory, cat. The author then describes the fascination with the mystery of consciousness. No black hole or parallel universe raises as many questions as the phenomenon of how we experience the taste of coffee or the warmth in our body. Modern science has amassed a vast amount of data on the brain, but the mystery of how it generates consciousness remains unsolved. This isn't due to a lack of data, but perhaps because we're approaching this problem the wrong way. The author argues that we're mistaken in thinking of the brain as the source of consciousness. It's an illusion created by evolution, which shaped our perceptions and understanding of cause and effect relationships. But this is just a superficial representation, like our understanding of computer games. We know that pressing keys creates certain effects on the screen, but that doesn't give us insight into how the computer itself works. Likewise, our understanding of objects and events in space and time is merely an interface for navigating life. Even physicists have realized that space and time, like the objects within them, are not fundamental elements of reality. They likely emerge from a more primary foundation that science has yet to discover. Cause and effect relationships are convenient for science and technology, but when we try to understand consciousness, they mislead us. The author criticizes attempts to explain consciousness through physicalist theories, where everything is reduced to neuron interactions. For example, the hypothesis that consciousness arises from orchestrated quantum collapses in brain microtubules, or the theory that consciousness is identical to the integration of information in neural networks. Neither of these theories explains how neurons produce sensations like the taste of coffee or the aroma of pine. The author believes we're looking for the answer in the wrong place, starting with space-time objects, and suggests a new approach. The main idea is that instead of starting with objects in space and time, we should consider conscious agents as the fundamental elements of reality. Consciousness is a network of such agents interacting with each other. Just as there are social networks in our world, reality may be a network of conscious agents. In other words, we live in a reality not made of objects in space, but of interactions between agents of consciousness. This is the approach to the nature of consciousness that Donald Hoffman proposes. Buy and read his book. It's full of examples supporting the author's hypothesis. I won't say I fully agree with him, but everyone is entitled to their opinion.
Except for you. Because where would a thought come from in your empty head?
Like, share, and feed Martin the cat, because I refuse to keep such a rascal on my own.